Hi guys, welcome to another tutorial video in the Unity series. Today we're going to be taking a look at target health systems and how we can apply damage to these targets by passing parameters from different scripts. Now the first thing we're going to have to do in this session is do a bit of cleanup on the original code that we created. Now within our bullet move script, which not only allows our bullet to move across the scene using velocity, a rigid body force, it collides with other objects in the scene which are then destroyed using the onCollisionEnter method. Now we don't want our objects that it collides with to be destroyed instantly. We instead want the objects to degrade in health and then destroy themselves. So it's unlikely that we are going to be wanting the destroy collision.game object on this script, because instead we want the object to destroy itself when it dies, i.e. when it loses all of its health. So the first thing we're going to have to do is remove the destroy collision.game object within our if statements. Now we also included an instantiate function which instantiated an explosion effect for the barrel. Now we also don't want the instantiate to happen when our bullet collides with the object with a tag of barrel tag. Otherwise, every time we hit the barrel, even if it was degrading in health, it would instantiate a new explosion effect. So instead what we want to do is put this instantiate effect on the target when it dies. So these two lines of code need to be removed from this if statement. So if we open up our bullet move scripts inside Visual Studio, go to these two lines within our first if statement, within our onCollisionEnter method, and let's remove them. Now the next thing to determine is what variables we're going to need to make this happen, i.e. how are we going to make our bullet provide damage to a target object. Now there's a few things that spring to mind there, one of which is a variable to record how much damage that the bullet provides, and the second of which is going to be the amount of health that the target has. Now it's likely that the variable to declare how much damage that a bullet provides is going to be on the bullet move script, because the bullet move script is attached to the object that we want to apply the damage with. And the target health is likely going to be contained within the target object. Now we haven't created a target script yet, we're going to be doing that next. However, for the time being, we just need to declare a value that every bullet prefab will produce. So we're going to create a public variable, and this public variable is going to be of type float. Now we're using a float value instead of an integer value, so we can specify decimal places. It may be, for example, that you want to do a little bit more customization on the damage when you're playing the game. So we're going to use a float value, which allows us to use a decimal place. Now in this instance, of course, we're just going to use a straight whole value. But we're going to specify this immediately. So we're going to specify this within the variable itself at the top within the public class. First of all, of course, we need to give it a variable name. So we're just going to call this damage. And then we're going to make it equal to 10f. Now we have to put f on the end of the 10 or any of the values that we include in there, because it is defining it as a float value. Okay, so it has to match up with the float variable type. Good. Now the next thing to understand is how are we going to pass this into another object. Now obviously we want the damage to occur when it collides with an object. In the case of a barrel, we want it to apply the damage when the onCollisionEnter has detected that the collision has a GameObject.tag of barrel tag. So it's likely we're going to include a function to do some damage here. Now this will be the first introduction to how we pass parameters through one script attached to an object to another script that's attached to an object. Now obviously in this instance we currently don't have a means of passing our damage to another object because we haven't created a script on that other object. So the next thing to do would be to ensure that we create a target health system first whereby we can then pass the damage from this if statement into the other script to take off the amount of damage to the health. So let's pop back into Unity, and we're going to create a new script which is going to be applied to our barrels. Okay, so the first thing to do, of course, would be to find the prefab of the barrel that we created. Now we want it to be applied to the prefab inside our project list, because that way it will update all of the barrels that we currently have in our scene. Now my prefab is inside my prefabs folder. You should make sure that all your prefabs are also organized the same way so you can access them quickly. And we're going to left click the barrel, and we're going to add a new component. Now this component is going to be a new script. So we're just going to type in there target, and we're going to say new script. It's going to give it the same name that we defined earlier, and it's going to be set in the language of C#. Click create and add. And we can see there, of course, that it's created a script within our prefab. Now, of course, that script will appear directly inside our assets folder. Now we want to move that target script back into our scripts folder, just so it's all nice and neat in one little place. Good. Next, open the target scripts, and this is going to be opened, of course, in Visual Studio. And this is where we're going to be creating our health system. Now within this script, we're not going to need to make use of the void start or void update methods. Instead, what we're going to be doing is creating our own method, which is publicly available to other scripts, in order to pass information into it, as well as control the amount of health and how much health is to be reduced on the target. So delete the void start and void update scripts. And the first thing we're going to do is specify the amount of health that the current target has. So to do this, we're going to do a public variable, and it's going to be of type float, again, because we can specify decimal places. And we're going to give it a variable name of health. Now this health is going to be set instantly to, let's say, 40F, but making this a public variable will allow us to specify different health values for different targets. It may be, for example, that you can use this target script on something else other than the barrel, and it may be, for example, that you want that target to have a higher health value or a lower health value. So specifying it publicly will ensure that we can specify these things inside the inspector. Now the next thing to do would be to create a new method which is publicly available, i.e. one that's going to allow us to pass in the damage value from the other script. And this is going to be called take damage. So we want take damage to control the amount of health it currently has and how much damage the target is going to take. So we open up our brackets and open up and close our curly brackets, and instead of leaving it as it is, as we usually would, we need to make sure that this method passes in some information. And the information that we want to pass in is the damage within the other script. Now you don't have to specify the variable of the same name. We don't have to specify damage, but we do need to specify that this method takes in some kind of value, and it's got to be the same variable type as what we're passing into it. So it's going to be a float, and in this instance, we're just going to call it amount. Now, the first thing this method will do is update the current health value every single time we specify that it's taking damage. Now, the bullet move script, of course, is going to be the one that's passing that information in, and it's going to be passed into a variable name of amount. So every single time this bullet move script calls this take damage method, because it's public, we're going to have to specify that in the bullet move script. We want the health to be reduced by the amount. Now to do that, we're going to specify health, and we're going to make it minus equal to amount, and end that line with a semicolon. Now, of course, we want something to happen when our health value is equal or less than 0. In that instance, we want the target to die. So we're going to write a new if statement here, and we're going to say if health is less than or equal to 0, and of course that's a float value, so it's f, open and close curly brackets, then we want our target to die. Now our die function, obviously we haven't created our method for die yet, so that's going to be the next step. However, for the time being, let's just create a new method called die. And let's just put a comment in there saying do something. Now, in order to pass in the damage amount to this method, we are now going to have to specify how to access the target script from the bullet move script. So we want to pass in the damage into this method every time our bullet object collides with the object with a tag of barrel tag. Now we need to declare the script that we're trying to interact with. So the first thing to do would be to specify a variable of type target. So this is the same whenever you're trying to interact with any other scripts within your Unity program. So we must specify outside of the if statement because of course we will be specifying other collisions as well in the future. So we're going to specify target, remember that's a lowercase t, and we're going to give it a variable name because we're going to have to pass in information into a variable to store data about the target. And in this instance, I'm just going to give it a capital T. And we're going to make it equal to the collision, so the object it's actually colliding with, dot transform. And we're going to get the components of that collider, so of that object it's colliding with, and the component we want to get from that collision object is target. So the script target, we want to get that target script from this component it's collided with. Now at the end of this line, we open and close with brackets and end the line with a semicolon. So this line here will allow us to interact with the target method. Now the target method, or the target class should I say, has a method called take damage. So every time we collide with this object with a tag of barrel tag, we want to run this method. So we want to pass in the damage amount into this method, in which the method will control how much health it's reduced by. So to do that, we must specify our new variable inside our if statement. So we're going to say target. Now we need to specify the method that it's using within the target script, and that's going to be dot take damage. And we want to pass in the amount of damage that the take damage will be using. And in this instance, of course, we are passing in damage. So we're going to declare damage. Now at the end of this line, finish with a semicolon and click save. You also need to make sure your target script is saved as well. And let's head over into Unity. Now as soon as we're in Unity, you'll notice that all the barrels that I've included now have a target script on them. Of course, because I've added the script to the prefab in the assets window. So select one of your barrels. I'm going to select the one that's closest to me, and you'll see that it's got a health of 40. So I'm going to click play, and I'm going to shoot a bullet at this barrel, and you can see there on the right hand side that the health has reduced to 30. Now every time I hit it, it's going to reduce to 20 to 10 to 0. Now after 0 or equal to 0, that is when this object is going to die. So it's likely that you're going to include the destroy game object within the target die method. So let's head over back into Visual Studio. And let's go to our target script. And within our void die method, we're now going to include the destroy game object function. Now in this instance, of course, we've just specified that we are going to destroy the object. We've already done a lesson on instantiation, so we shouldn't need to cover that again, so it's likely you'll be able to go off and do that by yourself. But if we make sure we save the script and move back into Unity, we can now click play. Give it a second to update first, click play, and when this barrel is destroyed, you can see there 30, 20, 10, 0, and the object is now destroyed. Now the same script can be applied to many different objects within our game, so perhaps we want this wooden crate to destroy as well. So I'll add the target script to the wooden crate, specify the health, and you just need to make sure that the script for the bullet move takes this into consideration. So you can see there we've got an if statement to detect the tag of the game object, which in this case will be crate, and we're going to call target.takeDamage damage again. Save it, head back over into Unity, click play, and you can now see when I shoot the game object of crate, it'll destroy that game object. Now, because we're going to be using the target script on many different objects within our game, it's likely we can go back to our bullet move script now and just improve the efficiency of it. You can see we have many different if statements in here, and potentially if we follow the same suit, we could have many more, which will reduce the overall efficiency given we are calling the same function many times, which increases the amount of compiling it has to do. So instead what we can do is remove those if statements, and instead we can replace it with a check to see whether or not the object it collided with has this target component on it. So we can call if target does not equal null. So if the target has the target component on it, we can then call the target.takeDamage function, and we're going to pass in damage. Now this will do exactly the same thing. It will ignore everything, so it won't execute this unless it's got the target component on the object. And again, it just improves the efficiency. So let's quickly pop back into Unity and double check this works effectively. So we can see that we attack the box and it'll destroy the box, and in the same way it'll now destroy the barrels. Now that's all for this session, guys. Next session we're going to be taking a look at how we can improve the amount of feedback that we get from objects within our game. So we're going to be taking a look at UI systems, including health sliders, and we're also going to be taking a look at our own player health.